Not your average JCC fare. So it is a great pleasure to introduce actor, puppeteer, director, and all-around nice guy, Frank Oz.
Thank you.
So I had the pleasure of interviewing Frank a couple of weeks ago at the Thalia, where we showed the Muppet movie, and we talked a lot about acting and puppeteering and your collaboration with Jim Henson. And today we're going to talk about your directing, and I want to start with another relationship, which is the one that you had with Steve Martin, or have, I should say. And this was the fourth movie that you made with Steve Martin. Can you talk a little bit about how that all came about and what that collaboration was like?
You don't plan things like this. It just kind of happens, and I think we had worked with Steve on the Muppet Show as a guest star. He had guest starred in a scene in the Muppet movie. When I was about to direct Little Shop of Horrors, David Geffen suggested Steve, and I went over to his place, and he told me how he'd like to do it, and I said, sounds great to me. And we did Little Shop, and then I think he had a script called for a house sitter. He didn't do it, another person did, and he said, hey, you want to do this? And I said, okay, and then I think I called him for another. It just kind of, went like that. It was those days, in the days when you could do that. You can't do that anymore. The corporations now, it's a different deal, But that I could call him. Bill Murray could call, hey, you want to do this? And I could call, but it's not quite that way anymore.
So was this movie at all improvised, or was it all on the page?
Well, with Eddie, I always welcome improvisation. If it's, you have to be a real pro to do it, though. Because you don't just talk, it has to, improvisation is not freewheeling. It's about story, it's an intent, it's character, it's flow of scene, it's all these things. And Eddie, he did some stuff there that was hysterical. That was ad-libbed. But Steve wrote this movie. And that's the joy that he trusts me and then I trust him.
Well, I mean, the comic timing in the movie is so amazing. I mean, just the way the actors play off of each other, but also the cutting style. The fact that this audience was laughing as loud as they are, that's all about the craft of comedy. And did that come to you naturally in terms of as a filmmaker?
I don't know. I don't intellectualize a lot, and I certainly don't talk about comedy because I don't know comedy. I don't want to know comedy. If you know something, you can't discover.
Well, you've acted a lot of comedy.
Well, I performed a lot of comedy. I've directed a lot of comedy, but comedy itself is such a what's confusing to me is people will ask about comedy, and you got to say, okay, like what kind of comedy? You're talking about buffoonery? You're talking about high wit? You're talking about physical comedy? You're talking about situational comedy. You're talking about dialogue comedy. There's many different kinds of comedy. So there's farce, So I don't know how. I have a funny bone, and I don't know how I got it. And then I think I just learned my craft a long time through performing, and then with Jim Henson's help, I went into directing, and I didn't screw up, so they kept on asking me to do movies.
So let's talk about that transition to directing from your acting career, from your performing career.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to be a theater director. Well, first of all, I wanted to be a journalist, and then I came to New York when I was 19, and I wanted to be a theater director, but I was too frightened to even say that. And I quit doing puppets when I was about 18 years old. And then Jim asked me to come when I was 19, and I became successful at something that I wanted to quit. So as much as I loved performing, and I loved performing with my guys, my brothers and sisters, I felt very hemmed in because I wanted to direct. And Jim is the one who gave me all the help, because when he was doing Dark Crystal, first of all, I gave myself 10 years to direct. I said, I'm going to take myself 10 years of learning to direct. After about 5 years, Jim asked me to direct Dark Crystal with him, when I had never directed a film before, and it was a massive film. And then he asked me to direct Muppets Take Manhattan, and after that, David Geffen asked me to do Little Shop of Horrors, and after that, Orion asked me to do Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and after that, I just kept on. I didn't screw up, so they kept on asking me. And that's kind of how it happened.
But was it a different, I mean, was it all just watching while you were acting?
Yeah. My film school was on the street, really, essentially, metaphorically. My film school was performing in dozens and dozens and dozens of TV shows and movies. So I would always look at the grip, and I ask the DP questions. I'd go to post and learn from that. I would learn wherever I possibly could. And so I'm a floor animal. I smell the floor and I step on cables. That's my life. And so I had that. So when I went to directing, I already had that as a life, and I learned a lot of the craft. But still, in my first movie, I totally screwed up in Muppets Take Manhattan. It took me a while to get comfortable to be a director where I felt I didn't have to know everything and I could rely on others. So it still took me a transition period to learn. Even though I learned the craft, I didn't learn. It took me a long time, several movies, to learn the manner in which one makes a movie with others.
And was it different directing people than puppets?
Well, that's the strangest thing. Now, why do you say that? Why do you ask that?
Just because it was funny.
Yeah, I know, because people always ask that, and I'm thinking, okay, so you really think the puppets live by themselves? I mean, like there's no people underneath them, and people direct the puppets and they don't talk to the people underneath.
You're bursting my bubble.
It's the strangest thing, because what you're talking to be highly professional people who work the Muppets, and the Muppet movies were the hardest movies to make. Very, very difficult to make because of all the technical stuff you have to deal with. So it's always odd to me that it was a difficult. I mean, I talk to the puppets. What? I have breakfast with them. I talk to the fellow professionals who do the job amazingly well. That's who I talk to.
So, looking at this movie so many years later, it's really interesting how, in a way, transgressive it is, particularly given what's going on in the world right this second. And I feel like we should talk about that for a second, because it's hard to imagine a movie like this being made today. Do you agree with that? Or?
I agree.
Yeah.
It's a complex thing. I mean, if you look at Friends couldn't be made today. I mean, you look at it's an incredible series, but all the sexuality, the male and female, and all the stuff going on, you wouldn't make that today, and you wouldn't make it with Heather screwing every guy today. You wouldn't do that, and you wouldn't. So, but it's. You're dealing with well, let's use a comedy as an example. Not say just drama, because I've dealt with drama in the same way. But with comedy, if I think it's important to accept people for who they are, women and men, and anybody in between or outside. Makes no difference at all. However, if you're not allowed to say certain things, it's a limiter. So if you wanted to make this movie in such a way it didn't upset anybody, it wouldn't be funny. I did a movie called Little Shop of Horrors, And thank you. Thank you. Nobody yelled. And thank you. Thank you. And what happened was that I mixed it in Goldman Studios in L.A. We shot it in London, and we mixed it in L.A. And I spent hours mixing it. Leslie, do you remember that? Leslie Converse was my assistant for many years, post-production supervisor. Now she's like a producer. She's a big deal now. Anyway, but we did the preview of Little Shop of Horrors, and what happened was, the audio was flat. It was just, do you know the songs, how exciting they are? It was flat. And I said, what the hell is, I spent hours mixing the highs and the lows. What the hell happened? I go back to the mixers and they said, we put a limiter on. A limiter is where you cut the highs out and you cut the lows out. You limit it. And I said, what the hell were you doing your job for if you put a limiter on? And so it was flat. If you put a limiter on what is now offensive, it's going to be flat. That's the thing. So you can have a movie that's flat, but not as funny, but appropriate for today's world, but that's not how I work.
Okay, I have one last question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience. This is like your warning to get your questions ready. The freeway scene is one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen in any movie. And I'm just curious if you could tell us a little bit about doing that scene, because it's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, remember, what I had to work with was Steve's script. Everything is, are you filmmakers at all, anybody? No? Yeah? Well,
Yeah.
It's script. Okay, it's script. Script. It is. So I had this script from Steve, and Steve trusted me, and we have a great relationship that way. So number one, it worked as a script. Now, the physical aspect of it, I remember, Leslie, I think the location scout went for months trying to close the Glendale freeway. Huh? Yeah, highway to close and own it. And as a matter of fact, I remember, if you remember, Leslie, we were concerned that Eddie might, Edward because I work with Edward Norton, he doesn't like to be called Ed. Okay, so Eddie, we were concerned, if you remember, that he might be too close to the traffic. We were concerned on the day he'd rightfully, understandably, balk. And Bernie Williams, who passed away, but he was a great editor. He worked with Kubrick, a producer. He worked with Kubrick. He worked with Leslie and me and everybody else. And so he said, what he did is he rented out the Dodger Stadium parking lot ahead of time. And he brought like 100, whatever it is, stunt drivers in to show Eddie how safe it was. So Eddie was over here, and he saw the drivers going back and forth like here. And he was close, but no closer than we are in New York City to traffic. And so Bernie was so smart ahead of time to let Eddie know that it was safe, So that was one good move. And then when we actually did the freeway, I didn't know how the hell to do it. So, I'm a director who has the whole vision and everything, but I don't know how to do that stuff. So Jackson DeGovia, who was my production designer and also production designed a couple of other movies I did, is great. He brought in Bill Taylor, and Bill Taylor passed away, but Bill got an honorary Oscar. He was so well known for special effects. And so Bill was there, and Bill showed us how to do it. Basically what happened was we emptied the freeway, because we owned the Glendale freeway for half a day, I think, right? I think it was a Glendale. And we owned it for half a day. And Eddie ran across an empty freeway. And I was saying, you got to pretend trucks are going to hit you, but you got to watch out. So he went across an empty freeway. Once he did that, we did two takes of that. I took the best one. Then Bill said, okay, run one series of traffic down it. So he had one series of traffic. It was a lock-off camera, it didn't move. Then, okay, another lane. And then another lane, single lane. And then at the end, you put all those lanes together. And then it looked like Eddie was going through them. And actually, the very last one, there's a truck at the end. We didn't have that, so we made a cardboard truck. And that was a cardboard truck running right past it. So but again, I'm not that smart. I can't do that. I rely on people.
That's the magic of the movies. All right, we have questions. Hands up. She's going to bring about around a microphone.
Hi, can I ask about another film? I love this film. I love The Freshman, and you directed was it The Freshman?
I didn't direct The Freshman.
Ah,
I directed Marlon Brando. I didn't direct Marlon Brando. I did Marlon Brando in a heist movie called The Score.
okay, because I was going to ask about working with Marlon Brando. What was that like?
It was difficult for both Marlon and me. It was a very difficult 3 weeks. And I don't want to get deeply into it, but I think he was a humanist and a very sweet man who didn't trust anybody. And he had a right not to trust anybody. Here's a story why he doesn't trust anybody, why he didn't trust anybody, okay? Maybe Les remembers this. You weren't there, were you, on that shoot? Yeah. So we were in Montreal shooting. This is why he didn't trust a soul, and he's right. We were in a shoot in Montreal. It was like 90 degrees. We were setting up the shot. Marlon was there, and this is very normal in movies and theaters, so you don't wrinkle your clothes and everything. He decided, and it was very hot, he decided to take his pants off and make sure it was not wrinkled, just give it to the wardrobe person, okay? And he sat down and played the piano until it was ready. And then when I was ready, he put the pants back on, and we did it. Well, probably some asshole crew member did some stuff, and it was around the world where Marlon wouldn't act with his pants on. This is what he got all his life, and that's why he didn't trust people. So it was a very difficult situation, and I'd have to sit in the bar with you with a beer for about 5 hours to tell you.
Hi, I'm actually shooting part of a film this Saturday on 35.
I can't PA, I'm sorry.
And I was trying to shoot in this garden, the Untermeyer Garden, up near Yonkers, and I can't get a permit because it's only for weekdays and I'm shooting on the weekend. So I'm literally trying to film there with no permit and just see what happens until I get kicked out. So just kind of ironic with what the film was about, and also, should I do it with no permit?
Well, you might check into the laws. It used to be, depending on how you shoot, it used to be you need a permit if you've got a tripod. If you've got a monopod, you don't necessarily need a permit. Sometimes. It depends. So it depends. You're looking for more stuff than that, you're in trouble. But, that's how, this is a love letter to a small group of people. It's a love letter to a Hollywood that doesn't exist anymore. It's a love letter to what I loved about this at the very end. This is from Steve's heart. Is the heart and soul of this whole movie, besides it being funny, is when they're all sitting there looking at the movie over there. They're all sitting there, and all their faces, and this is what they dreamed. This was a dream, and when this movie has always been to me about these little band of people who love movies. And the only thing holding them back is their complete lack of talent. But that's endearing because they still believe in those faces, And that's where the heart and soul of the movie was, just four faces looking at this piece of shit.
Way up there.
I have a question.
I'm sorry, but make it happen. I mean, Sweetback's badass song. They needed the fire department. This is the 1960s. They needed the fire department to shot, and they had a false alarm, and they shot it, and they ran like hell. Do what you have to do.
Okay. You just actually referenced one of my questions, but before I ask the question, I have to thank you first. When I was a child, two of my favorite memories. My mom reached out to the staff at Mad Magazine and took me down to the offices, and I got to meet like Bill Gaines and some.
Oh, really?
Yes, and another call she made was to Sesame Street when I think you were taping on the Upper West Side. This is a little, I'm dating myself.
That's right, over in where Teletape, where Staples is right now.
Yes, and you were there, and I have a picture of me and Grover.
Oh, really?
Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you. Oh, wait. Okay, and my question really quickly is, obviously, you sort of referenced Melvin Van Peebles' Sweetback's Badass Song, and I want to thank everyone is talking about in Hollywood how like a lot of actors are out of work, and the fact that this, even though it's a comedy, it's about people making films on a low budget. And I'm thinking you also referenced Little Shop of Horrors. Obviously, Roger Corman did a lot of low budget films, but a lot of people in Hollywood loved him and got to start with him. Do you think the trend is going to actually go back to a lot of people just doing independent films, or do you think Hollywood is going to have, it's?
Well, I think there's no choice. I mean, we're dealing with an antiquated system with Hollywood right now, and but there's a lot of indies. I'm trying to make a couple of indie films, very low budget right now. Even with my name, it's hard to get. I don't know if I can get money, even with my name, because it's a whole different world out there. But I think you have no choice. But fortunately, you do have iPhones, and that. When I was shooting film, I had to, we'd have to shoot with. Panavision, whatever else we got. You can do any movie, you can do it now. And the spirit of independent film is alive. The only thing is not alive with it is the funding, But I think, in my opinion, I think the studios will go on making huge, big movies for tentpole production. But I think there's, like Fahrenheit 451, is it? There are still people in the forest remembering these classics. There are still people in the forest while they're burning the books. There's still people in the forest remembering Dickens and all the classics. So before they die, they can put it out. Those are like independent filmmakers, and they're going to be around. They are. It's just the spirit of it.
They'll just need a place to show all these great films.
That's the thing, is distribution. Who said that?
That's me over here, too.
Yeah, distribution, you're absolutely right. That's one thing it's very tough is all my films I made have been shown, and they've been shown in like thousands of theaters. I've been incredibly lucky, but that is a big problem. Once you finish a film, how to get it out there.
I know of one place that's going to show films, but let's take one last question up here.
First off, thank you for all of your films. They're amazing.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about a specific part of this movie, which is kind of the mindhead portion of this film. You can't help but not think it's maybe a reference to some other big thing in Hollywood. Did you have any trouble, especially in Hollywood, kind of doing a plot line that kind of seemed to be referencing something else? I know Paul Thomas Anderson had trouble with The Master very similarly.
Yeah.
Was that an issue for you while you?
It wasn't an issue. They wanted to see the work print, and I said no. No, none of your business.
So, Frank, thank you so much.
Let me just say something, by the way, before you go. I've lived on the Upper West Side since 1976. Still do. And the highest I can go for a movie theater is 84th Street. Unless I want to go up to Magic Johnson, 124th Street, right? But I live down here. It's my neighborhood. So I think it's great what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I want to give a huge thank you to Frank Oz, Ira Deutschman. Check out all the programs of Upper West Side Center for the love of cinema. And please join us for more screenings here weekly. Thank you and have a good night. Get home safe.